Welcome, friends. I'm Rachel Maddow, and tonight we're going to unpack a story that has shaken both the U.S. economy and the corridors of power in Washington. It's a story about legal authority, executive overreach, economic consequences, and the ripple effects that reach every American household. The Supreme Court has just ruled against former President Trump's tariffs, and the implications are enormous, both politically and economically. From Wall Street to Main Street, no one will be untouched by what this decision means. The case centers on the Trump administration's use of executive authority to impose tariffs on billions of dollars worth of imported goods. These tariffs were controversial from the start, sparking trade wars, consumer backlash, and intense debate in Congress. Proponents hailed them as protection for American workers' industries. Critics warned of inflation, higher costs, and retaliation from international partners. And now, after years of litigation, the nation's highest court has drawn a line in the sand. This is not just a legal technicality. It's a profound rebuke of unilateral executive power. The Supreme Court's decision underscores that even the president is bound by the Constitution and federal statutes. The ruling invalidates billions of dollars worth of tariffs, potentially forcing the government to refund fees collected from companies and consumers, and sending shockwaves through supply chains that have been recalibrated over years of trade tension, and the timing is critical. We are living in a moment of economic fragility, rising inflation, market uncertainty, and an electorate sensitive to price spikes at the grocery store and the gas pump. When the Supreme Court acts to block a major economic policy, it doesn't just impact corporations and investors. It impacts families, consumers, and communities nationwide. That's why tonight we will go beyond the headlines to explain the legal reasoning, the economic consequences, and the political fallout, including how figures like Warren Buffett are reacting to what this means for investors and the economy. This story is also a window into the broader questions of governance in America. What role do the courts play in checking executive power? How far can a president go before he steps outside the bounds of the law? And what does this say to the checks and balances designed to keep our democratic institutions functioning, even when political pressures run high? So tonight, we will walk you through the Supreme Court's decision, the immediate response from the White House, the reactions from economists, investors, and international trade partners, and why this ruling may very well reshape U.S. economic policy for years to come. This is a story about law, power, and money, and it's unfolding in real time. Buckle up. The repercussions of this ruling are larger than most Americans appreciate, and the ripples have only just begun. The Supreme Court's ruling against former President Trump's tariffs is not simply a legal decision, it is a seismic event in American governance, trade, and politics. It represents at its center the deepest assertion of the principle that even the highest executive office is bound by law. The case itself focused on the limits of presidential authority under federal trade statutes, questioning whether unilateral action could impose tariffs of such scale without congressional approval. In a decisive majority opinion, the justices found that the executive branch had overstepped its authority by invalidating billions of dollars in tariffs that had been levied on international imports. In practical terms, this decision forces a cascade of consequences across the U.S. economy. Businesses which had adjusted supply chains to account for these tariffs may now face the logistical nightmare of recalibration. Companies which have already paid these tariffs are now potentially entitled to refunds, and the process of reimbursing billions of dollars is already generating bureaucratic friction at the Treasury Department. For consumers, the ramifications are equally immediate. Products which had become more expensive due to these tariffs, electronics, appliances, industrial materials, and even some consumer goods, may see price reductions, but only after complex market adjustments. And within the White House, the reaction was immediate and chaotic. Officials scrambled to interpret the decision, with some senior advisors reportedly urging a careful, measured public statement to avoid further market instability. Others, less concerned with optics and more with preserving political narratives, pushed for rhetoric, emphasizing external factors or judicial activism as the cause of economic uncertainty. The tension between presenting a unified front and managing internal disagreements is emblematic of the broader challenges that administrations face when policy decisions are struck down by the courts. It is a delicate balance, demonstrating adherence to the rule of law while mitigating the appearance of weakness or mismanagement. Economists and financial analysts have been quick to weigh in. The removal of tariffs could bring short-term relief and import-heavy industries, various reports note, but the overall economic picture is decidedly more complex. Companies that had invested in alternative supply chains relying on tariff-induced incentives to produce domestically or source from different countries now face a strategic recalibration. The ruling disrupts business projections and long-term planning, and for multinational corporations, it raises questions about risk management, compliance, and contractual obligations. Markets reacted immediately. Futures, contracts, and stock indices showed increased volatility, reflecting investor uncertainty in response to sudden policy reversal. Notably, Warren Buffett, one of the world's most closely watched investors, weighed in on the ruling almost immediately. Buffett emphasized that the Supreme Court's decision underlines the importance of stability and predictability in trade policy. According to his statements, tariffs create artificial market distortions, and their abrupt removal or imposition leads to inefficiencies that can ripple throughout the economy. Investors and corporations alike rely on clear, consistent rules for trade. When those rules shift unexpectedly, even with good intentions, market confidence wavers. Buffett's perspective highlights a critical point. Economic policy cannot exist in a vacuum, and the interplay between executive action, judicial oversight, and market response has tangible consequences for every American household. The international response has also been swift. Trade partners, including China, the European Union, and Canada, welcome the ruling, framing it as a step toward restoring fairness in global trade. Some countries even said they would seek compensation for retaliatory actions or revisit trade deals that were altered in reaction to the tariffs. The impact is both economic and diplomatic. It creates questions over the United States' reputation as a reliable trade partner, and the Supreme Court's ruling underscores an old truism. Even the strongest executive actions are not beyond checks and balances. Beyond its economic implications, the ruling carries heavy political overtones. The White House, which had justified the tariffs as a means of protecting American industry and jobs, now finds itself confronting a narrative problem. To critics of the administration, the tariffs were always about political theater rather than strategic economic policy, and this latest court decision gives them judicial ammunition. For supporters, they must square the legal reality with a political message of strength and protectionism within the administration. Policy failures leading to broader instability or erosion of confidence in governance must be avoided at all costs, with both public messaging and internal morale being put to the test. Legal analysts have also been poring over the decision for its wider implications. What the Supreme Court did was reaffirm perhaps one of the oldest principles in American democracy. No president, past or present, can act outside the scope of legislative authority if the latter has explicitly legislated on a particular matter. It could also set a precedent for future battles between the executive and legislative wills, extending from trade policy to regulatory authority, military action approval, and many other places where unilateral action by the executive has been claimed. In other words, the decision reminds people that checks and balances are not theoretical, but real, and can be enforced against even the most politically powerful individuals in the country. Lastly, its implications for public perception cannot be understated. Americans who have borne the brunt of higher prices because of the tariffs may view this as vindication, while those concerned about executive overreach now have a clear example of the judiciary doing its job. Public confidence in both government and institutions may be influenced not only by the immediate economic effects, but also by the broader message that accountability matters and the structures designed to protect citizens and ensure fairness still function even under political pressure. The Supreme Court's decision, therefore, is far more than a legal technicality. It is an event that intersects law, economics, politics, diplomacy, and public perception. It forces the White House to contend with a reality it may not have fully anticipated while sending signals to corporations, investors, and international partners that unilateral executive actions, even those framed as national defense of industry, have limits. And as the administration navigates this unprecedented moment, one thing is clear. The consequences of this ruling will reverberate far beyond the courtroom, shaping policy, markets, and political strategy for months, if not years, to come. As the Supreme Court decision sinks in, the White House is facing a crisis that extends far beyond the headlines. This is not merely about the legal invalidation of tariffs. It is about a government forced to confront the consequences of policy decisions that have been years in the making. The moment the ruling was announced, senior aides scrambled to understand the full implications for federal revenue, international trade relations, and domestic political stability. Messaging teams raced to craft statements that could reassure the public without conceding that the administration's strategy had been struck down by the highest court in the land. Behind the closed doors of West Wing offices, aides, advisors, and political strategists were engaged in a delicate balancing act. How to explain a policy failure without admitting that the executive branch had overstepped its authority? The economic consequences are immediate and profound. Billions of dollars collected from tariffs may now be subject to refunds, potentially creating a massive financial burden on the Treasury. Importers and manufacturers, some of whom had adjusted operations to comply with or mitigate the tariffs, now face logistical upheaval. Supply chains that were rerouted, shipping routes recalculated, and pricing strategies revised are now being disrupted again. Companies that invested heavily in domestic production to avoid tariffs must reassess whether those costs were worth the gamble. Meanwhile, consumers, many of whom have already felt the pinch of rising prices, are caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty. Will goods become more affordable? How long will it take for price adjustments to filter through retail markets? These are real, tangible concerns for Americans who rarely see the inner workings of international trade reflected in their grocery bills within the political sphere. The Supreme Court's ruling is a potent reminder of the limits of executive power. Trump-era tariffs were framed as a demonstration of presidential authority, an assertion that the president could unilaterally reshape trade policy for the sake of American workers. But the court's decision makes clear that even the highest office is subject to boundaries set by the Constitution. This has set off a fierce debate among lawmakers and analysts. Some say it restores balance and accountability, making clear that in the realm of trade and taxation, Congress, not the president alone, is the ultimate authority. Others say it sets a precedent that would hamstring rapid responses to an international economic crisis, narrowing the scope of action by the executive branch in moments of strategic necessity. Investors in the financial world are closely watching the fallout. An abrupt invalidation of tariffs introduces market uncertainty affecting equities, bonds, and commodity prices. Industries that had benefited from tariffs, steel, aluminum, and some consumer goods, may face renewed competition from imports, reducing margins and rewriting forecasts for employment. Warren Buffett's reaction underlines the broader view in the market. Predictability and stability in trade policy are crucial for investment planning. And when tariffs are imposed or rescinded abruptly, companies must react at speed and at great cost. Investors rely on consistent rules. Sudden shifts can trigger market volatility, eroding confidence and slowing growth. Buffett's assessment is not just about the immediate effects on profits. It's about the long-term implications for market efficiency, risk management, and corporate strategy. The Supreme Court's ruling ripples beyond borders. U.S. trade partners, from China to the European Union, are interpreting the decision as an opportunity to reset negotiations. Countries that had faced punitive tariffs now have a platform to demand compensation, revise bilateral agreements, or adjust trade practices in ways that could disadvantage the United States. Allies and adversaries are closely watching how American trade policy can be challenged and how judicial oversight may constrain executive flexibility. The message is crystal clear. Unilateral trade action, even if framed as protecting domestic interests, is legally precarious and diplomatically complicated. Adding another layer of complexity is public perception. Americans who have seen higher prices due to the tariffs on electronics, household goods, and industrial material may view this ruling as a victory. It underlines concerns that the tariffs function more as a political tool than as effective economic strategies. Still, parts of the populace that supported these tariffs may feel frustrated or even betrayed by the Supreme Court's ruling as standing in the way of protecting jobs and industries at home. The administration must navigate this fragmented public opinion with care, balancing reassurance for those economically impacted with political messaging that does not alienate supporters. The White House's internal response has been one of tension and urgency. Advisors face a dual challenge operationally: how to manage refunds, recalibrate trade enforcement, and stabilize markets, and politically, how to frame the ruling to maintain credibility and authority. Leakage reports suggest that the internal debates have been fierce, with some aides advocating for an immediate admission of error and a recalculation of policy, while others push for a narrative emphasizing judicial overreach or external economic pressures. This clash of strategies only underlines the complexity of governing in a system where legal checks are powerful and public perception is immediate. The media and financial analysts are weighing in on the broader significance. Beyond tariffs, the ruling raises questions about the role of executive authority in economic crisis, national security, and trade enforcement. If unilateral presidential action is now more constrained, future administrations may need to navigate a more deliberate, legislatively dependent path, potentially slowing responses to international crisis or geopolitical challenges. Critics warn that this could limit American agility in responding to rapidly evolving global markets, while supporters argue it ensures accountability and prevents executive overreach. Finally, the ruling is a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of law, economics, and politics. Decisions made in the halls of the Supreme Court cascade through markets, boardrooms, and households. They shape investor confidence, corporate strategy, international diplomacy, and public trust in government institutions. In the case of these tariffs, the court's intervention disrupts established systems, forcing reassessment and adaptation across multiple sectors. The White House is compelled to act quickly, not only to manage financial and logistical repercussions, but also to restore public confidence in governance. In essence, this Supreme Court decision is a pivot point, a moment where law, economics, and politics converge. It reminds us that even the most powerful executive decisions are constrained by constitutional authority, and that the consequences of overreach ripple far beyond the courtroom. For the American public, for investors, for global trade partners, and for the White House itself, this ruling is a call to reassess, adapt, and confront the realities of governance under law. As the dust settles from the Supreme Court ruling, the ripple effects are being felt not just in Washington, but across the country and around the globe. The White House's internal scramble is only the first layer of a complex story, one that extends to industries, financial markets, international relations, and everyday Americans who are suddenly questioning the stability of policy and leadership. This section dives into the broader economic, political, and societal consequences of the court's landmark decision. The immediate economic impact cannot be overstated. Billions of dollars in tariffs previously collected from international imports are now under scrutiny. Companies that had paid these fees may be entitled to refunds, but the bureaucratic machinery required to process these claims is cumbersome and slow. Customs officials, accountants, and corporate legal teams are already overworked, trying to untangle years of documentation, invoicing, and compliance records. Meanwhile, importers who adjusted prices or supply chains to accommodate tariffs must now pivot yet again, creating logistical confusion and financial strain. Retailers and manufacturers are bracing for a market correction. Prices of imported goods, from electronics to industrial materials, may decrease, but only after adjustments ripple through distribution networks, warehouses, and retail chains. Conversely, industries that benefited from tariffs, such as domestic steel and aluminum, face renewed competition, potentially resulting in reduced profit margins and strategic reevaluation. In essence, the Supreme Court ruling creates a cascading effect, forcing businesses to quickly reassess everything from pricing to production strategies. The financial markets reacted almost immediately to the decision. Stock indices fluctuated as investors recalculated risk, uncertainty, and the potential for long-term disruption. Analysts highlighted that the ruling undermines confidence in unilateral executive measures and emphasizes the need for policy predictability. Warren Buffett, among the first financial leaders to publicly respond, underscored that markets thrive on stability and clear rules. His message is simple yet profound. When tariffs are imposed, then invalidated by the courts, investors, corporations, and consumers all pay the price for unpredictability. Beyond the domestic economy, the ruling has far-reaching international implications. U.S. trade partners, the People's Republic of China, the European Union, and Canada, among others, are carefully watching events unfold. For years, retaliatory measures and altered trade agreements were designed to counterbalance tariffs. Now, those strategies may need revision. Countries may request compensation for tariffs already paid or leverage the decision to renegotiate bilateral trade arrangements. In this sense, the Supreme Court's ruling is not just a domestic event, it is also a diplomatic signal that U.S. policy is ultimately bounded by constitutional law and judicial oversight. Allies and adversaries alike are calibrating their strategies in response. Politically, the ruling is causing turbulence within the White House and on Capitol Hill. Advisors face a difficult landscape. How can one project competence while acknowledging the reality of a major policy reversal? Public messaging teams thus had the unenviable task of framing the decision in ways that mitigate political damage. Critics have argued all along that these tariffs were about political theater rather than sound economic strategy, and the Supreme Court's ruling validates that perspective. Supporters will have to square their ideological commitment to protectionist policies with a legal reality that points out a fundamental tension in American governance between political aspiration and constitutional constraint. Public perception is another critical factor for everyday Americans. Tariffs have real-life implications: higher costs for goods, disrupted supply chains, and uncertainty in employment sectors tied to trade. Many of those who have been affected might look on the Supreme Court's decision as a kind of relief, a course correction that eases financial strain and restores some measure of predictability. Others, however, may see the ruling as an attack on policies they supported, perhaps eroding trust in both the judiciary and government institutions. Managing these divergent perspectives is a key challenge for policymakers and political strategists alike. The Supreme Court's decision underlines broader questions about the separation of powers. Executive overreach, particularly in economic and trade policy, has long been a contentious issue. In blocking the tariffs, the court reinforces the principle that the president cannot act unilaterally in areas where Congress has established authority. This is more than legal theory. It has practical consequences for future administrations. Any attempt to introduce wide-reaching trade measures without legislative approval may now be subject to stricter judicial scrutiny, forcing leaders to balance rapid action with constitutional constraints. Another layer of complexity comes in the intersection of law and economics. Policy decisions like tariffs are not simply political statements. They have measurable effects on industries, investment strategies, and consumer behavior. The Supreme Court ruling brings into sharp relief how legal oversight shapes economic outcomes in real time. Companies that invested heavily in domestic production to avoid tariffs must now reassess whether those investments were prudent. Financial markets predicated on predictable policy environments must now adjust to sudden regulatory reversals. In short, the legal system has proved itself not only a check on political power, but also a determinant of economic stability. Internationally, the ruling sends a clear message. U.S. trade policy is subject to judicial review, and foreign partners can anticipate a more legally constrained approach to unilateral executive action. This could influence negotiations, treaty compliance, and retaliatory strategies. Countries that previously faced tariffs may now pursue redress or renegotiate agreements to reflect the changed legal and economic landscape. For diplomats and trade negotiators, the ruling is a reminder that law, policy, and diplomacy are deeply interconnected. Finally, the ruling's symbolic impact cannot be ignored. Beyond the immediate financial and political consequences, it reinforces the principle that no one, not even a former president, is above the law. It is a visible demonstration of constitutional checks and balances in action and a lesson in accountability for both policymakers and the public. Americans watching the decision unfold are reminded that governance is a system of interlocking powers, each designed to limit abuse, protect citizens, and maintain stability in complex economic and political environments. In conclusion, the Supreme Court's decision to block Trump's tariffs is a turning point with layers of economic, political, and societal consequences. From corporate supply chains to consumer prices, from market volatility to international diplomacy, and from political strategy to constitutional precedent, this ruling reverberates through every facet of American life. The White House is confronted not only with immediate logistical and political challenges, but also with a reminder of the enduring power of checks and balances. In short, this is a decision whose effects will be felt long after the headlines fade, shaping trade, governance, and public perception for years to come. The Supreme Court's decision to block Trump-era tariffs is not just a legal headline. It is a catalyst for a wide-ranging reassessment of American trade policy and the very nature of executive authority. Across the federal government, from economic policy teams to regulatory agencies, officials are grappling with the consequences of a ruling that invalidates billions of dollars worth of trade measures and underscores the boundaries of presidential power. This is a moment that lays bare the intricate interplay between law, politics, and economics. And it demands attention not only from policymakers, but from every American whose life is touched by the global marketplace. At the core of this ruling is a legal affirmation that unilateral executive action has its limits. The president cannot impose tariffs outside the scope of congressional authorization. And in so doing, the court's decision reinforces that principle with clarity and finality. This perhaps seems like a narrow legal point, but its implications are vast. It sends a message to future administrations that economic tools wielded at the presidential level are constrained by constitutional and statutory boundaries, and any attempt to bypass Congress carries real risk for industries, corporations, and investors alike. The lesson is clear. Policy volatility is not just political, it is judicially constrained. In practical terms, the fallout is immediate. Federal agencies are now tasked with recalculating tariff revenues, processing potential refunds, and advising impacted companies on compliance. Businesses must readjust supply chains that had been altered to accommodate tariffs. Retailers, importers, and exporters face sudden uncertainty. Contracts signed under tariff assumptions may now need renegotiation, and pricing strategies for goods ranging from electronics to industrial equipment must be revisited. This logistical and financial ripple effect is a testament to how one judicial decision can cascade through the economy in ways predictable and unforeseen. From a political perspective, the White House finds itself in a delicate balancing act.